Did Mr. Trudeau win, or did the Conservatives lose?
Hey, that's a great question, Tom. Either way you slice it, we've got a divided nation this morning. Look, on the one hand, the Trudeau team, the Liberal Party, wakes up this morning in power. So that is a positive for them. But like his father before him, and you know, when there are high battles, big battles out there, there can be casualties. Like his father, he begins his second term with a minority government as opposed to a majority government. You mentioned the Conservatives, Tom. They kept the Liberals out of the province of Alberta. Look, on the global stage, we know there had been Trudeau mania. Justin Trudeau had become a star, and we know that there was a lot of excitement, but here at home, ethical scandals, broken promises, left the Liberals in a very tough spot on this campaign trail. So you saw the Conservatives do incredibly well in Alberta, and the Liberals doing well in Ontario, including here in Toronto. And then Quebec was a really fascinating one too, Tom, because we saw the Bloc Québécois, which had been left for dead. They found a lot of votes overnight. So it's going to be a very interesting return to Parliament.
Well,
for sure.
That's a nice mixer. That's right where I wanted to go back to Mr. Trudeau Sr. and the immense tensions between English-speaking Canada and the French of Quebec as well. How did Quebec and the entire emotion of Quebecois, how did that fit into the forming of this minority system?
Well, I think right now in this country, first of all, let's just, the reality is that the Canadian economy is still driven heavily by the energy sector, which has had challenges. We're right now talking about, on some levels, a very healthy Canadian economy, but anyone who's been out to Alberta over the last couple of years know it has been challenging for that sector. And I think that's where you start to see the economic divide. And then within Quebec specifically, it's complicated, Tom. I mean, I mentioned some of the ethical scandals. SNC-Lavalin, a company that was at the center of the firestorm surrounding Justin Trudeau, as a Quebec-based company. Sometimes from the West, that was viewed as favoritism towards Quebec. But even within Quebec, it just felt like that star power that we saw, all the selfies in the first year of the Trudeau government, that had kind of washed away. And then you saw, as I mentioned, this resurgence for the Bloc Québécois. Now, I will say that this is a party that did not campaign on the idea of separatism. I mean, this is a party that was really about just getting back to Quebec issues. One could make the argument, Tom, that when we're talking about separatism, there's a lot more of that you see on Twitter tied to Alberta than you would see from Quebec. But now the challenge for Justin Trudeau, who for the most part, because he had a majority government, chose to go it alone, is going to have to find friends in Parliament. Some of those friends could come from some of those new seats the Bloc Québécois have, who are definitely going to go after Quebec-based interests. Some could come from the NDP party, which we didn't really talk about, but on some levels, through their leader, Jagmeet Singh, had an encouraging campaign, better off than where some thought they would be 8 weeks ago. And he might have to find the balance of power with those two parties who have been very against pipelines. So there's going to be a very interesting economic story playing out here.
OK, so let's just dig into that a little bit more. The Conservatives backed the oil sector, the Conservatives lost. What is the new administration going to mean for the oil sector? What does it mean for the carbon tax? What does it mean for the environmental policies that Trudeau has been pushing?
Yeah, Guy, I think this is really at the center of what we're going to be watching very closely here right now. Just to be clear, with respect to that carbon tax, and there are many across the business community in this country who have felt like that has been a competitive disadvantage for Canada, even though it does help to offset some of those concerns about climate change, which were very real. We saw those on the campaign trail. Under a Conservative leader, Andrew Scheer, they had talked about wiping away the carbon tax within 100 days of office. We're no longer talking about that. I think the balancing act, though, because Justin Trudeau has already committed to trying to find that balance between climate change and the energy sector. Heck, Guy, we saw the government literally buy a pipeline. So, which obviously that was a difficult story for him to sell with investors. He's going to have to try to continue to push that agenda at the same time that his best allies could ultimately be the parties that are against pipelines in the first place.